Chapter 4494. Seeing Fairy Xingyu leave, Suji shook his head slightly and said, "Alas, she's so strong." Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat, and he said in a low voice, "Senior, why don't you say it in front of her?" Suji put away the expression on his face and replied indifferently, "Why should I say it?" "Senior." Xiao Hua wanted to play matchmaker and said, "Actually, how can you not understand Senior Xingyu's thoughts? Sometimes the window paper still needs us male cultivators to poke through it." Suji looked at Xiao Hua meaningfully and said, "Do you know what I'm thinking?" "I don't know." Xiao Hua answered honestly. "Then don't say too much," Suji said angrily. "Just take care of yourself. Among the 3 continents, you're the one with the most trouble now." Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Senior, don't worry. Junior knows what to do." "Well, I know that every cultivator has their secrets, and you're no exception." Suji nodded. "I don't want to probe too much. Oh, by the way, Fairy Xingyu and I sense some fluctuations related to the secrets of heaven in the direction of the Hall of Heroes. However, when we investigated the star-picking tower and gathered the disciples to ask, we didn't find any clues. This matter, is it related to you?" "Secrets of heaven." Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. After thinking for a moment, he nodded and said, "Junior saw the Hall of Heroes and the Hall of Heroes and had some understanding of karma. If the secrets of heaven are related to karma, then it's related to me." "Hiss!" Suji gasped and said in surprise, "The way of karma? One of the 3,000 great Taoists. The way of karma? You actually know how to cultivate the way of karma?" Xiao Hua shook his head and said, "Junior doesn't know what the way of karma is. Junior just met a woman named Jiuxia on the Dawn Rain continent. She gave me 2 jade slips. One was the sun shrouding art, and the other was the heaven control technique. Junior first cultivated the sun shrouding art, then dabbled in the heaven control technique. This so-called heaven control technique might have some relationship with the karma that Senior mentioned." "Jiuxia." Suji frowned, and a rare solemn expression appeared on his face. He transmitted a voice transmission. "Are you sure her name is Jiuxia?" Xiao Hua was startled and also nodded and said, "That's right. It's Jiuxia. This junior won't remember wrongly." Suji thought for a moment, then raised his hand. A lightning net the size of a fist appeared in his hand. As he waved his hand, the lightning net flew out and covered the space several hundred feet around them. As the lightning net entered the space, obscure fluctuations appeared in the space. "Xiao Hua," Suji transmitted his voice again. "Does Jiuxia have any obvious characteristics?" "There are no obvious characteristics." Seeing how serious Suji was, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent and honestly replied, "She's a beautiful woman. Is that woman so beautiful that you can't forget her?" Suji asked. "Even if you don't think about her, she will still appear in your mind. Or do you want to forget her, but you can't forget her?" Xiao Hua smiled bitterly and said, "Yeah. Could it be that Senior has encountered it before? I don't have the same opportunity as you." Since Suji already knew, his face regained its calmness, and he replied indifferently, "I just saw such a record in a secret record of the immortal realm." Xiao Hua was even more anxious and transmitted his voice in a low voice. "Senior, can you explain in detail?" Suji didn't answer him. Instead, he closed his eyes and used his thumb and forefinger to pinch the space between his eyebrows, rubbing it gently. A wisp of lightning flickered between his eyebrows. Xiao Hua didn't dare to disturb him and only watched quietly. After a moment, Suji opened his eyes and sighed. "Xiao Hua, do you know about Qingxiu Mountain?" "Qingxiu Mountain?" Xiao Hua shook his head almost without thinking. "This junior doesn't know. Then do you know about the 9-tailed fox?" Xiao Hua still shook his head. "This junior doesn't know. Qingxiu Mountain is a barren mountain in ancient times, and the 9-tailed fox clan lives on this mountain. The 9-tailed fox clan knows yin and yang and is good at transformation. They are often associated with the powerhouses who changed the world in ancient times. Moreover, every 9-tailed fox is a rare beauty in the eyes of humans, and also a rare demon in the eyes of demons. Let's put it this way. The nine-tailed fox is a demon condensed from the most beautiful een in the world. It is a fatal temptation to every existence with yang aura. However, they don't seem to reveal their true appearance to any human or demon, and would only take out their illusory appearance unless they decide to follow that person or demon for life. Of course, no one can tell whether it's an illusory appearance or their true appearance, which is why no one knows how beautiful they are. Although Su Ji was transmitting his voice was still very low, and he continued. It said that the nine-tailed fox clan has always started their name with Zhou. If I'm not mistaken, the Jiuxia you met is a descendant of the nine-tailed fox of Qingxiu Mountain. Seeing Su Ji so solemn, Xiao Hua asked curiously, "This Jiuxia said she's not from the Donrain continent, but this junior doesn't know where she's from either. Could she really be from Qingxiu Mountain? That's absolutely impossible." Su Ji shook his head. The nine-tailed fox of Qingxiu Mountain would never come to the present realm. She could only be a descendant whose bloodline had wandered to the lower realm. Also, could there be some taboo in Qingxiu Mountain? Xiao Hua asked again. Su Ji nodded. That's right. If it weren't for the three continents, this Su wouldn't have dared to say the three words Qingxiu Mountain. Why? Xiao Hua asked curiously. Don't ask why, this Su doesn't know either. Su Ji replied. This Su is merely a punisher of the Punisher Palace. This. Xiao Hua was stunned and stared at Su Ji. Then why are you telling this junior all this, senior? Sigh. Su Ji sighed in a rare instance and looked up towards the distance, his gaze seemingly piercing through time and space as he said, because this Su had received guidance from the nine-tailed fox before ascending to immortality. Later, after ascending to immortality, I obtained somewhere in the immortal realm the legacy of the Qingxiu Mountain lineage that had fallen to the immortal realm. Although this Su's divination technique is evolved from thunderbolts, its foundation is still the legacy of the Qingxiu Mountain. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. You seem to be saying too much, senior. You don't have to tell this junior all this. No. Su Ji shook his head. This Su had long predicted that you were fated to meet this Su. Previously, this Su only thought that you were related to the Xingyue Palace, but I didn't expect that you were actually related to the nine-tailed fox. Think about it, that Jiu Xia. How did you get to know her? Boom! When Xiao Hua heard this, it was as if he was suddenly enlightened. His body shook as if he had been struck by lightning. He looked at Su Ji with a dumbstruck expression and muttered, Jiu Xia said that what she wanted this junior to do was too difficult. It would take 10,000 years or even 100,000 years to accomplish it. Therefore, she did not tell this junior what she wanted this junior to do. She is indeed a cunning nine-tailed fox. She is indeed a nine-tailed fox who knows yin and yang. Su Ji sighed. If she hadn't been able to predict that you would meet this Su in the three continents, you would have to cultivate for 100,000 years before you could ascend to the immortal realm and meet this Su. Xiao Hua was confused again and smiled bitterly. Could it be that finding senior is what Jiu Xia wants this junior to do? To be precise, it's to find the inheritance that Qingqiu Mountain left in the immortal realm, not to find this Su. As Su Ji spoke, he tapped between his eyebrows, and the lightning mark between his eyebrows flashed again. When a thumb-sized lightning ball appeared, Su Ji instructed, Xiao Hua, use vigorous thunderbolt to collect this lightning ball. Be careful, don't expose the thing inside the lightning ball. Yes. Seeing that Su Ji was so serious, Xiao Hua hurriedly tapped between his eyebrows. Several thick lightning threads appeared and landed on the lightning ball, waiting for it to fall between Xiao Hua's eyebrows. Su Ji let out a long sigh and ordered again, Remember, this matter and this item must not be known to anyone. Otherwise, your life will be in danger. Even this Su won't be able to survive. Xiao Hua nodded. This junior is the best at this kind of thing. That's good. Su Ji gave a rare smile. This item is Qingqiu Mountain's inheritance. You should be able to comprehend it when you're cultivating Fury of Thunder. Oh, right. Your so-called mastery of heaven and earth must be related to this inheritance. You should be able to comprehend it when the conditions are right. If that's the case, then Jiuxia must be related to this item. This junior can then pass this item to Jiuxia with peace of mind? Xiaohua asked doubtfully. It should be. Suji shrugged, as if he had put down a heavy burden, and replied. Senior, are you sure? Xiaohua asked. Suji nodded. Of course. When you come out of Xingyue Palace, you'll understand why I said so. Yes. This junior understands. Xiaohua nodded. If this is Jiuxia's, this junior will definitely. At this point, Xiaohua said happily, if that's the case, then this junior will definitely return to Dawn Rain Continent. This? I don't know. Suji shook his head. Didn't Jiuxia say that it might be 100,000 years? Maybe she'll go to the immortal realm to look for you. Then, Suji reminded him again. Of course, the matters of Dawn Rain Continent seem to be somewhat secretive. However, since Xingyue didn't say anything, I'm afraid she has some taboos. Don't make things too difficult for her. As he spoke, Suji raised his eyebrows and opened his mouth. A thunderbolt struck the air. The thunder net that had previously been hidden in the void revealed itself and entered Suji's mouth along with the thunderbolt. In just a few breaths, Fairy Xingyue returned with a murderous look on her face. How was it? Suji asked. Did you find it? I don't dare to say anything about the 3 continents, but within Xingyue, there's nothing I can't do. Fairy Xingyue replied with a cold snort. Xiaohua smiled and asked, in that case, other than Jiaxing Lu, it also involves the hidden immortal continent. Fairy Xingyue glared at Xiaohua and said fiercely, it's only been a few days. Why are you becoming more and more like Suji? Can't you say something nice? Chapter 4495. Hearing this, Xiaohua looked at Fairy Xingyue innocently, touched his nose, and said, I'm not like Senior Su, but like Senior Su, I like to seek truth from facts. Seek truth from facts. You have the nerve to say that. You touch your nose again. Fairy Xingyue replied. You guessed right. I removed a few star-picking towers in the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm, but 2 tower masters were not satisfied. They wanted to take advantage of me entering the Star Moon Palace to collude with the Confucian family to seize the Star Moon Palace. Unfortunately, although I found the 2 tower masters and even found out about the Confucian cultivators who sneaked into the star-picking tower, I couldn't find out which Confucian family was behind them. I searched the soul of one of the tower masters, and his primordial spirit exploded. Then, I used the secret technique of the Palm Palace. That Confucian cultivator's primordial spirit didn't explode, but I couldn't find anything. It's really strange. Suji said indifferently, don't worry. You have a lot of time before the Star Moon Palace appears. But then, Suji suddenly raised his head and looked to the east. He whispered, I'm afraid you don't have time. Sure enough, Fairy Xingyue also looked in that direction and smiled bitterly. You're right. Xiaohua released his divine consciousness in surprise. Unfortunately, he didn't find anything. After a few breaths, Suji and Fairy Xingyue looked solemn. Fairy Xingyue said to Suji, think about it carefully. What are we not prepared for? I'll get them to activate the star-picking tower now. Okay. Suji nodded. After Fairy Xingyue left, he pointed to a quiet room and said to Xiaohua, Xiaohua, that's a quiet room. You can meditate there. When we get to the Chitty River, I'll call you out. At that time, I'll need to borrow your magic power. Yes, I understand. Xiaohua nodded, got up, and entered the quiet room. The quiet room was not big, only about 100 feet in size. It was very different from the usual luxurious style of the star-picking tower. When Xiaohua saw the praying mat in the middle of the quiet room, his heart warmed again. Needless to say, Suji must have used this room for his own quiet cultivation when he came to Jiaxing Lu. Now, Suji had given this quiet room to Xiaohua to use. Of course, there were many quiet rooms that could be used in Jiaxing Lu, but Suji had taken out the quiet room that he was used to. It was clear that he saw Xiaohua as his junior. Xiaohua sat down cross-legged and pondered for a moment. Then, he waved his hand and sent out a jade talisman, setting up the capital star formation. After scanning with his divine sense and confirming that there were no flaws, Xiao Hua sat down with peace of mind, raised his thumb, and placed it on his forehead. Thunder flashed, and the ball of lightning Su Ji gave Xiao Hua flew out again. However, at this moment, the ball of lightning had just appeared, and it immediately emitted a faint fluctuation. The fluctuation had only just appeared when Xiao Hua's mind swept the ball of lightning into the space in an instant. The ripples then charged towards the capital star array. Whoosh! The fluctuations weakened, but when they collided with the capital star formation, the space several meters to the left of Xiao Hua trembled. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and raised his right hand, using the thunder palm. At that moment, the lightning palm was different from the lightning palms displayed by ordinary cultivators. It was formed from the 5 Qi righteous lightning, 9 firmaments divine lightning, 3 corpses een lightning, and nether demonic lightning. When the lightning descended, the fluctuations were instantly eliminated, leaving not a trace behind. Soon after, Xiao Hua closed his eyes in satisfaction. His eyes focused on his nose, and his nose focused on his heart as he began to meditate. Xiao Hua's mind fell into the space and immediately turned into Jade Archive Xiao Hua. The ball of lightning that had been swept into the space by his mind earlier quietly floated there. Although the threads of lightning were constantly flashing, they didn't make any sound. The light and shadow emitted by the threads of lightning were also extremely strange and constantly changing. Even Jade Archive Xiao Hua was dumbfounded when he saw this. Looking at the space around the light and shadow, although there wasn't any force, the threads of lightning were still forced out of the cracks. Ripples of the same cryptic fluctuations spread out in all directions. Jade Archive Xiao Hua raised his hand and pointed. With a tearing sound, it was as if silk was being torn apart. Under the threads of lightning, layers of lightning bolts rushed out like dragons and crazily collided with Jade Archive Xiao Hua's finger. Jade Archive Xiao Hua frowned and made a grabbing motion with his right hand. Buzz! Tens of thousands of layers of crystal-like light shields instantly appeared and trembled as they imprisoned the space several meters around the threads of lightning. Boom! 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 The threads of lightning were also powerful. They crazily attacked the restriction and broke through layer after layer. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of layers of restrictions were like blooming flower buds. This is the restriction set up by Su Ji. Feeling the familiar fury of lightning within the threads of lightning, Jade Archive Xiao Hua pondered. However, this restriction seems to be targeted at the inheritance item inside. When I forcibly broke the restriction, it triggered the restriction. While Xiao Hua was thinking, Jade Archive Xiao Hua's right hand made a grabbing motion. Hum. With several explosions, tens of thousands of light barriers appeared once again. When the horned dragon-like lightning threads disappeared, 90% of the light barriers had been penetrated. Boom! The threads of lightning disappeared, and the lightning ball also turned invisible. At the same time, a 9-color beam of light let out a loud roar and rushed high into the sky. The 9-color beam of light was so gorgeous that it reflected on Jade Archive Xiao Hua's face and made it look sparkling and translucent. Inside the beam of light, a palm-sized 9-tailed fox sculpture appeared. When Jade Archive Xiao Hua's gaze landed on this sculpture, he immediately felt that everything in front of him was multicolored, and a kaleidoscopic world was born near Jade Archive Xiao Hua. Jade Archive Xiao Hua was startled and hurriedly closed his eyes. However, the rotating multicolored world was like a flower floating in his mind, and it made him feel like he was sinking deeper and deeper. Damn it! Jade Archive Xiao Hua cursed and quickly retreated. Thunder appeared between his eyebrows. Sure enough, the thunder struck and shattered the multicolored world. In front of Jade Archive Xiao Hua's eyes was another pillar of light that soared into the sky. Jade Archive Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes, and his eyebrows turned into lightning. Through this lightning, Jade Archive Xiao Hua was able to see the colorful fox sculpture clearly. However, Jade Archive, Xiao Hua only glanced at the colorful fox sculpture and immediately frowned and looked up at the pillar of light that pierced the sky. The pillar of light was still rushing up, and there was no sign of it stopping. Damn it, this inheritance item of Qingqiu Mountain is too strange. No wonder Senior Su warned I. Jade Archive, Xiao Hua sighed and stretched out his hands. His left hand reached down, and his right hand reached up and pressed down. Jade Archive, Xiao Hua's hands suddenly crossed space and landed on the two ends of the pillar of light that was madly rushing out. Then Jade Archive, Xiao Hua, put his hands together again. Boom, 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 like the sound of the pillar of air exploding. The huge pillar of light was actually pressed into the nine-tailed, colorful fox sculpture by Jade Archive, Xiao Hua. Then, Jade Archive Xiao Hua did not wait for the nine-tailed, colorful fox sculpture to make any more movements. He grabbed with one hand, and a layer of restriction fell on the painted sculpture. The painted sculpture then returned to its calm state. The Jade Archive, Xiao Hua frowned slightly and looked at the painted sculpture. He saw that the endless waves of light appeared again. The waves of light rippled like fine lines, and the nine-tailed fox in the painted sculpture disappeared in an instant. A strange and clever squirrel was revealed. Before Jade Archive, Xiao Hua could see clearly, another wave of light emerged under the fine lines, and another ferocious and strange demonic beast was transformed. Oh! Jade Archive Xiao Hua was surprised. In a few breaths of time, the colorful fox had changed into no less than a dozen different appearances. Along with Jade Archive, Xiao Hua's surprise, the beautiful appearance of Jiuxia changed. That smile yet not smile, that angry yet not angry voice was like the first time Xiao Hua saw it. It's really powerful. Jade Archive, Xiao Hua nodded. Jiuxia's appearance disappeared, and a nine-tailed fox's original appearance was born. The nine-tailed fox's nine tails each had a different color, and there were endless threads of light in each tail. Each thread of light contained a lot of brilliance, just like a world of brilliance. Looking at the nine-tailed fox's body, there were even more brilliant spots of light, like the stars in the starry sky. Not only did they emit brilliance, but they were also endlessly rotating. It seemed that each spot of light had its own trajectory, and each trajectory revealed a kind of mystery. The nine-tailed fox's original appearance was only revealed in a split second. If Jade Archive Xiao Hua was not in his space, he would definitely not be able to see it. Then, countless illusions were born on the nine-tailed fox's painted sculpture, and the nine-tailed fox's original appearance could no longer be seen. Jade Archive, Xiao Hua closed his eyes and thought for a moment. Rumble. The karmic hand hidden in the void within the space appeared. The big hand grabbed, and the nine-tailed fox's painted sculpture flew out of thin air and slowly fell into the big hand. The painted sculpture just touched the karmic hand, and the endless spots of light contained in the painted sculpture immediately flew out like butterflies and landed in various parts of the big hand. Swish, swish, swish. Strange fluctuations rushed out from various parts of the karmic hand. These fluctuations intertwined with each other, and pieces of light and shadow drifted down like fragments where the fluctuations intertwined. And within these lights and shadows, there were pieces of small worlds hidden within them. Slowly, the nine-tailed fox's painted sculpture merged into the karmic hand, and the space near the karmic hand trembled. In the trembling, it was as if there was an invisible chisel, chiseling out the unclear lines on the karmic hand one by one. Ha! Jade Archive Xiao Hua watched as the karmic hand became clearer and clearer, and couldn't help but laugh. Jiuxia really is of the Qingqiu lineage. The records in this legacy item are of the same origin as the mastery of heaven and earth. Along with his laughter, Jade Archive Xiao Hua's figure began to change. Just like the nine-tailed fox's light and shadow, he had already changed into dozens of images in the span of a few breaths. Only after half a cup of tea's worth of time did Jade Archive Xiao Hua's figure appear. He looked at his hands with great satisfaction and laughed. I previously thought that my transformation technique was pretty good, but compared to the Qingqiu lineage's transformation technique, it's like the difference between heaven and earth. The Qingqiu lineage's so-called understanding of yin and yang and being adept at transformation really isn't a bluff. Let the karmic hand comprehend the yin and yang technique. I will learn this transformation technique, and in the future, I'll be able to deceive the 3 continents. Chapter 4496. With that thought in mind, Jade Archive Xiao Hua emerged from the space and focused his mind on his physical body. His hands did not seem to make any hand seals as his physical body began to slowly transform. First, it was various forms of humans, then beasts, and finally plants and flowers. It was incredibly lifelike. At the same time that Xiao Hua was cultivating the Qingqiu sect's secret art, the dozens of pavilions outside the star-plucking tower were now spinning faster. The flames and colorful lotuses that were the silhouettes of light before were now clouds, while the star-plucking tower that was shaped like a pagoda was now slowly becoming oval. As the clouds fell into the sky, pillars of noble qi crashed down. As the pavilion spun, rays of starlight swayed and appeared. The light screen of stars and moon also gradually rose from the pillars of noble qi. Rumble. When a space hundreds of miles around the star-plucking tower was filled with clouds and starlight, the entire ground began to shake. Amidst the rumbling, the star-plucking tower was uprooted out of thin air. Beneath the ground, the star-plucking tower's foundation broke through the ground. Rocks tumbled and mountain ridges collapsed. A 1,000-mile-long ship flew out from the ground. Lightning arcs flashed around it as it rose into the air. The ship looked similar to the Thunder ship, but in reality, there was a huge difference. The star-plucking tower in the center of the ship alone was something the Thunder ship did not have. Moreover, the lightning arcs around the ship looked powerful, but in reality, they were still relying on the power of the clouds, stars, and moon. They were far less powerful than the Thunder ship. The flying ship first soared into the sky. Countless great qi pillars in the void crashed into the defensive array outside the ship. Auspicious clouds floated out from the defensive array. Woo-woo! Amidst the whistling of the wind, the flying ship began to slowly fly towards the rising sun. Xiao Hua hid in the quiet room to cultivate. In the beginning, his physical body still had some shape and could transform into all things in the world. However, in the end, his body no longer looked like a body, nor did it have a fixed shape. It turned into a stream of light, and also turned into floating clouds. Spots of light were finally born in the capital star array, as if stars were flashing in the sky. In front of Xiao Hua's eyes, the colorful world that he saw when he used the lightning escape to its limit was faintly born again. Xiao Hua did not dare to slack off, nor did he dare to further comprehend that level. He merely maintained his original state, carefully comprehending and observing the state of his physical body. The secret arts of Qingqiu flowed in his mind like a clear spring. After an unknown amount of time, the light spots in the entire space flickered and instantly gathered together. Xiao Hua's silhouette was revealed. At the same time, thousands of phantoms emerged from the silhouette like a peacock spreading its tail. When the phantoms were annihilated, Xiao Hua's smiling figure quietly stood in midair. At this moment, Xiao Hua seemed to be standing in the air, yet also seemed to be drawn into the void. His body seemed to be in the light, yet also seemed to be in the darkness. Between the light and the darkness, strands of twisted light rapidly flowed out of Xiao Hua's body. The distorted Xiao Hua seemed to be both real and illusory at the same time. He was stepping on the boundary between real and illusory. So that's how it is. A smile appeared at the corner of Xiao Hua's lips. It had more charm than before, but the compassion in his black and white eyes did not change at all. Xiao Hua mused to himself. So-called transformations are nothing more than the combination of light and physical body. The inferior would use the physical body to drive light and shadow. The mediocre would use light and shadow to power the physical body, while the superior would fuse light and shadow together with the physical body. It's a pity. Even if the Qingqiu lineage knows that yin and yang are adept at transformations, they would never know that there's a light escape technique in this world, one that allows one to hide in light as an escape technique. Light and shadow would fuse with the physical body at a superficial level, and the physical body would fuse with light and shadow at a profound level. In the end, the art of yin and yang is the true foundation of the Qingqiu lineage, while transformations are but a minor detail. And yet, I was able to comprehend the surface of it in such a short period of time. Senior Su, the immortal realm's enforcer of punishments, had not gained much from the legacy of Qingqiu Mountain for so long. Aside from the fact that Senior Su had never practiced the art of heaven and earth manipulation before, it is also because Senior Su does not possess a demon form and could not grasp the mysteries of the demon's cultivation of the power of stars and moon. More importantly, Senior Su has never refined the rainbow bone, which means he could not comprehend the mysteries of light and physical body. Xiao Hua's brow lifted at the thought, an indescribable elegance appearing between his brows. He floated up from the praying mat, raised a hand, and grasped. His hand instantly turned into a sheet of light and shadow, and the hundreds of jade talismans that had been laid out in a formation fell into his hand like swallows returning to their nest. Just as he put away the jade talismans, a faint voice wafted from outside the sanctuary. "Xiao Hua, this junior is here," Xiao Hua hurriedly replied. "Is something the matter, Senior Su? The Chitty River is up ahead. If you don't have anything urgent to cultivate, come out of seclusion first." Su Ji did not use his divine ability, but only transmitted his voice softly from outside. Xiao Hua flew to the door of the sanctuary, urged his body to pass through the pavilion, and appeared in front of Su Ji. He smiled and said, "This junior has already finished his meditation and was waiting for Senior to summon me." "Oh." Su Ji's gaze swept over Xiao Hua, and he could not help but be surprised. Behind him, Fairy Xingyu also said curiously, "Xiao Hua, you seem to have changed into a different person." Xiao Hua touched his nose and said with a wry smile, "Seniors, what do you mean? I've only been cultivating in seclusion for dozens of days. Why do I seem to have changed into a different person?" The ancients have said that a scholar who has been away for 3 days should be looked at with new eyes. Fairy Xingyu looked up and down at Xiao Hua again, pursed her lips, and said with a smile, "This sentence is especially suitable for you. Previously, you were like a Xiao Hua. Although you were budding, you were abnormally shy and had a bit of a dusty aura. But now this Xiao Hua has bloomed. Not only is its fragrance assailing the nose, but is also glorious. Even if light dust falls on it, it will produce a luster. Not to mention other things, just this little habit of yours of wiping your nose. It looked a little funny before, but now it has a kind of cute and attractive charm. Even I can't help but feel a sense of familiarity." "Elder sister," Xiao Hua said with a wry smile, "can you not be so mushy? Why does it sound like there's a lot of cosmetics?" "Xingyue is right," Su Ji said meaningfully. "You have indeed made me look at you in a new light. Senior, you flatter me." Xiao Hua understood tacitly and bowed. "This is all thanks to Senior's kindness. This junior dares not forget it." Su Ji helped Xiao Hua up and said, "Opportunities are opportunities. This is the will of the heavens." "What are the two of you doing behind my back again?" Fairy Xingyu asked. When she saw the two of them acting like this, she immediately understood something. "If you give Xingyue to Xiao Hua, I will consider telling you." Su Ji turned to look at Fairy Xingyu and said calmly. When Xiao Hua heard this, he smiled wryly in his heart and thought, "Senior Xiao, are you trying to help me or set a trap for me?" Xiao Hua naturally wanted Xingyue, but Fairy Xingyu clearly had her own plans and had no intention of handing it over to him. When Xiao Hua encountered the betrayal of the two Zhaixing Lu, he did not express his intentions. He only asked Fairy Xingyu to investigate herself. He had already made his attitude clear in advance. Zhaixing Lu had nothing to do with him. Since Fairy Xingyu saw that there were some problems with Zhaixing Lu, she must be able to predict that Zhai Xing Lu would be in chaos in the future. Given this, Fairy Xing Yu might have the intention of entrusting Xiao Hua to him. Now that Su Ji had said this, even if Fairy Xing Yu had such thoughts, they would definitely be dispelled by Su Ji's words. Sure enough, Fairy Xing Yu smiled coldly and said, "It's up to you whether you want to say it or not. The matter between two men has nothing to do with me. I just taught a few more secret techniques of the immortal world. Who doesn't know how to do it? Teach me if you have the ability." Su Ji retorted sarcastically, as if he was looking for trouble. Fairy Xing Yu was slightly taken aback. However, after a moment, she smiled and said, "Of course I know how to. However, that will have to wait until he reaches the immortal world. Let's go." Su Ji glanced at Fairy Xing Yu, knowing that she was warning him. However, he did not take it seriously and said, "The Star Moon Palace is already close at hand. Aren't you anxious at all?" "Phew." Fairy Xing Yu straightened up and stretched. Her slender body was not much different from Su Ji's. Then, Fairy Xing Yu yawned and said lazily, "I was naturally excited the first few times. However, I'm used to disappointment now. Even though I've made so many preparations for the appearance of the Star Moon Palace, I don't dare have any more extravagant hopes when I think about the possibility of failure." Su Ji frowned and said, "Didn't I tell you? With Xiao Hua's help this time, there won't be too much of a problem. Your divination technique?" Fairy Xing Yu smiled slightly and asked in return, "If there was a well-tested divination technique in this world, would you still be banished to the 3 continents? If your divination technique was really useful, would you still need to explore the Star Moon Palace for the 9th time? In this world, there are many fickle people. There are many feelings of loss and loneliness. Change is the essence of the heavenly way. You and I are just ordinary immortals. We can't take a peek at the heart of the heavenly way." Needless to say, Su Ji could already sense the deep sense of loss in Fairy Xing Yu's tone. Xiao Hua also understood that Fairy Xing Yu's heart had been hurt by the 2 traitorous stargazing tower masters. Thus, she had doubts about the entire Star Moon expedition. Su Ji opened his mouth, wanting to say something. However, when the words reached his mouth, he swallowed them back down. This was because Fairy Xing Yu also knew what she should say. Xiao Hua did not need to say more. However, Xiao Hua might not know what Fairy Xing Yu wanted to hear. Therefore, Xiao Hua glanced at Su Ji and said to Fairy Xing Yu with a smile, "Fairy, what are you saying? In the eyes of the tens of thousands of humans and demons who entered the Star Moon Palace, you are the heavenly way. They racked their brains to enter the Star Moon Palace and find their own opportunities inside. However, how could they know? You were the one who found the Star Moon Palace." The most fundamental mystery of the Star Moon Palace is the passageway to the immortal world. Of course, women were the most fickle. Xiao Hua's strong flattery made Fairy Xing Yu's face instantly look better. She rolled her eyes at Su Ji and said, "Can't you say something nice? P.S. I'm glad to hear that Bai Jibao and Li Tong got married yesterday. I wish the golden couple 100 years of happiness and a long life together." Chapter 4497. Without waiting for Su Ji to speak, Xiao Hua immediately laughed and said, "Senior Su, I'll tell you more when we reach the immortal realm. There are too many people now, so it might be inconvenient to talk about some things." Fairy quickly opened Zhai Xing Lu. Fairy Xing Yu glanced at Su Ji angrily. When she saw the coldness in Su Ji's eyes, her heart trembled. Just as Xiao Hua had speculated, the Punisher Celestial Lord and the Disciplined Celestial Lord were not on good terms, and the Punishment Palace and the Discipline Palace were like fire and water. It was fine if Fairy Xing Yu and Su Ji were in the 3 continents, but if they returned to the immortal realm, how could they be so free? Although they had not yet returned to the immortal realm, Su Ji had already begun to be on guard, and Fairy Xing Yu had a premonition of the estrangement between the 2 of them in the immortal realm. Alas, even if they are immortals, so what? Fairy Xing Yu sighed secretly. With a wave of her sleeve, a cluster of starlight flew out from her hand and rushed to the top of the palace. When the brilliance of the top of the palace appeared, A clear and cloudless blue sky appeared in front of Xiaohua. Suji glanced at Fairy Xingyu and said to Xiaohua, "Let's go. This is the Chitty River. The signs of the Star Moon Palace's appearance are obvious. It will appear at any time." "Okay." Xiaohua nodded and followed Suji out of Jiaxing Lu. At this time, Jiaxing Lu stopped on a mountain range. On one side of the mountain range, the disciples of the 100 schools of thought had begun to leave Jiaxing Lu one after another. The disciples of Jiaxing Lu, as well as the cultivators who had been selected to follow Jiaxing Lu into the Star Moon Palace, flew to the other side of the mountain range. Xiaohua just looked around when suddenly an indescribable wind whistled in the distance. Xiaohua hurriedly turned his head. In the east, a majestic river seemed to have come from the sky. It rushed across the ground and fell to the end of the sky. The river seemed to be endless and also seemed to be bottomless. The orange river sparkled under the sun. If there was more orange, it would be similar to the Blood River. If there was less orange, it would not be as brilliant as it was now. This was the Chitty River. The sparkling scarlet color covered the surface of the river like tiny swimming fish. Wisps of water vapor rushed into the air and emitted a scarlet glow. Although this scarlet glow was very thin, its brilliance was not inferior to the surface of the river. Where the wind blew, the brilliance swayed, and different illusions surged out. Occasionally, some clouds would surge and turn into colored glass, precious pearls, ingots, pearls, and other shapes, making them even more dazzling. Although the scenery of heaven and earth was vivid, after looking at it for a while, Xiaohua felt somewhat bewildered. This was because above the surface of the river, the sound of the wind could be heard. Huge gusts of wind whistled past, as if there were many wind tunnels. The strange sounds were even more soul-stirring than the wails of ghosts and howls of wolves. However, in this violent wind, the surface of the river was picturesque, and the waves were like flowers. It was no different from the usual calm and tranquil waves. What was special was that under those thin ripples, the river water did not have any impurities. It was incomparably clear and bright like a crystal. At a glance, one could see more than a dozen feet. Under the surface of the water, perhaps there were some swaying aquatic plants. Perhaps there were some floating algae. But no matter if it was fish, shrimp, or river worms, there were no traces of them. Xiaohua was just about to release his divine sense to investigate, when boom! The sound of an explosion resounded from several thousand li away in the sky. Immediately, 10,000 waves surged violently like a tide, hiding the sky and covering the earth as they smashed down, covering an area of 10,000 li. Under the waves, an indescribable distortion appeared in the sky of 10,000 li. This distortion was like tens of millions of tiny vortexes. Not only did the nearby airflow mutate, crisscrossing and attacking, even the splashing sunlight flashed with light. The entire space of 10,000 li was filled with these waves, as if an enormous bubble was rapidly spreading in all directions. The ripples soared high into the sky, and clouds were torn apart one after another. Many fine spatial cracks could be faintly seen. The ripples crashed into the river's surface, and many ditches that were several feet long were torn open. The ripples blew across the ground, and sand and pebbles were sent flying. Thousands of spiderweb-like cracks appeared on the ground. However, the surface of the river still did not show any waves. The sand and stones on the ground rushed up several feet and then fell back down. It was as if a large hand was firmly pressing down on the space of several thousand li. Xiaohua's gaze fell on the waves of space. Similar to the nine-tailed fox painted sculpture, layers upon layers of light entered Xiaohua's mind. Tens of thousands of balls of light attracted Xiaohua's gaze. Although Xiaohua tried his best to avoid his gaze falling on these balls of light, in a flash, a spot of light had already appeared in front of him out of thin air. Boom! The moment Xiaohua's gaze fell, a primitive catalog crashed into Xiaohua's mind. This prehistoric catalog was a little different from what Xiaohua had seen before. Although the mountains were extremely tall and the water was extremely deep, the mountains were collapsing and the water was pouring down. Amidst the rumbling of the mountains and rivers, there were many incomparably huge figures crazily fighting. These figures held lightning in their hands and spat out stars from their mouths. With a single punch, the sky would collapse. As their gazes wandered, the stars would explode. All kinds of indescribable wills and unparalleled power swept through the entire primitive world. These wills were extremely provocative and tyrannical. Even the incomparably huge primitive world could not withstand these wills. Xiao Hua was already at the grand ascension stage of the human race, and he had also experienced the ruins and the primordial continent in the past. But as soon as his spiritual sense came into contact with these consciousnesses, he was struck by a sense of inferiority and a sense of acute pain welled up in his mind. Xiao Hua did not dare to be negligent. He hurriedly withdrew his gaze and his scattered divine consciousness from the balls of light. However, in the space within 10,000 miles, a remnant red color had already appeared. The moment Xiao Hua's gaze fell, the sky gradually darkened. The setting sun, which was supposed to be setting in the west, shone listlessly in this space. Pieces of broken spiritual consciousness, rays of light that had been stripped away, and strands of remnant spiritual consciousness wandered helplessly in the blood-red color. Woo! Just as Xiao Hua was about to sigh, a wave that could destroy the heavens and the earth was born in the center of the space. A hurricane suddenly rose with the wave, and thousands of miles of space were torn apart. Wave after wave of collapse spread in all directions. In just an instant, the 10,000 miles of space that was previously covered completely disappeared. The balls of light were void, and the waves were void. Even Xiao Hua's divine consciousness, which had fallen into the space, was not spared. The collapse of the space was very strange. It was only within 10,000 miles of space, and outside of the wave, it was not affected at all. Furthermore, after the collapse, countless primordial chi of heaven and earth rushed in from other places, and the entire space gradually returned to its original state. Seeing this, Xiao Hua could not help but be dumbfounded. He thought to himself, "Oh my, what's the origin of this star-moon palace? How is it related to the Eldritch world?" However, it was only a moment before he came to a realization. Nonsense. If there's no origin, how can there be an opportunity to enter the immortal world inside? How can two immortals, Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu, spend so much effort to enter? However, the Star-Moon Palace has yet to appear. Just this premonition should be enough to extinguish the ambitions of many cultivators, right? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua looked around again. Indeed, the spaceship that Zhaixing Lu had restored had already descended from the sky and stopped steadily between the mountains. There were many Zhaixing Lu disciples sitting cross-legged on the spaceship. Every one of them was meditating, and wisps of noble chi and primordial chi of heaven and earth were entering the spaceship through the void. On the mountains around the spaceship, the 100 schools of thought had already dispersed. Many Confucian cultivators were lying on the ground dispiritedly. Some had blood at the corners of their mouths. Some had blood seeping out of their 7 orifices, and some even had holes in their heads. Xiao Hua was only at a corner of the Chitty River. When he looked at the other places, he saw many great demons with 7th grade primordial chi scattered all over the place. Xiao Hua's gaze swept across, and there were tens of thousands of them. Unlike humans, the great demons were mostly alone and did not have any followers. Moreover, among the tens of thousands of great demons, nearly 10% of them were lying on the ground, and they all looked seriously injured. There were even close to 100 great demons whose bodies had already collapsed, and it seemed that they would not survive. Not far from where the great demons were, there were some Buddhist disciples. There were not many of them, only about 1,000 of them. However, these Buddhas did not have the usual kind looks. Instead, they were all glaring angrily, and it was obvious that they were Buddhist guardians. On the other side of Zhaixing Lu, the situation was different from that of the demon race. Although it was already dusk, there was a brilliant brilliance in this space. Layers of auspicious clouds spread out in the sky like a barrier. Pillars of awe-inspiring chi, driven by the inscriptions on the armor, danced like horned dragons. Images of men plowing and women weaving, scholars reading at night, and generals fighting on the battlefield appeared on the inscriptions on the armor. Above these images, there were 4 huge flower-shaped flying boats that emitted a low rumble, and a majestic, awe-inspiring aura spread out in all directions. This aura carried enlightenment, subservience, majesty, and also self-admiration. Oh, just as Xiaohua was about to take a closer look at the 4 flower-shaped flying boats, a slightly puzzled voice sounded in his ears. "Why aren't you reacting?" Xiaohua turned his head and looked at Fairy Xingyu, who was standing not far away and looking at him. He smiled and said, "What kind of reaction does this junior need in order to express his admiration for the Star Moon Palace? Is it subservience to the aura in the premonition?" No. Fairy Xingyu was obviously not attracted by Xiaohua's deliberately awkward choice of words. Instead, she shook her head and said, "You definitely have some secrets that you have not mentioned. The premonition of the Star Moon Palace is extraordinary. Even when Su Ji and I saw it for the first time back then, we could not help but be deeply affected by it and almost suffered from it. However, you are completely fine. It even gives me a feeling that this is a common occurrence. Oh, if even the 2 seniors are deeply affected by it, what about the other disciples?" Xiaohua was shocked and hurriedly looked at the flying boat that Zhaixing Liu had transformed into. "They are fine," Su Ji's voice sounded. "Because the premonition is too powerful, I have already placed a restriction outside the flying boat. The disciples of Zhaixing Liu cannot see these premonitions. After a while, I will open the restriction and let them get used to the aura of the Star Moon Palace." "That's good." Xiaohua looked at the strange flying boat and said with a smile, "Senior, the style of this flying boat doesn't look very good." Chapter 4498. That's right. You have good taste. Fairy Xingyu was a little surprised by Xiaohua's reaction. Xiaohua wanted to distract her, but he couldn't. However, when Xiaohua mentioned the style of the spaceship, her attention was immediately attracted. She pursed her lips and said with a smile, "When I built this spaceship, I didn't like this style. But Su Ji said that this was the style of his hometown spaceship. He liked it, so I had to give in to him." "Xiaohua, you really have good eyes. You can tell at a glance that this spaceship is not good-looking." "That's right." Xiaohua pointed to the huge deck and the cabin on the deck, and said with a smile, "This style is too square. It's actually not suitable for the spaceship to fly. Junior's 2 thunderboats are not as big as Senior's spaceship, but in terms of flying speed, I'm afraid that Senior's spaceship can't compare. Your thunderboat borrowed the essence of the thunder vanquishing bead and used the thunder pool as its driving force. It doesn't need any primordial stones or arrays as its foundation, so its speed is naturally fast." Su Ji glanced at Xiaohua and said, "Punisher Heavenly Lord has such a flying boat. How can I compare to Punisher Heavenly Lord?" "Oh." Xiaohua patted his forehead and pretended to be surprised. "What a pity. What's wrong?" Fairy Xingyu was surprised and asked, "Did you forget something?" "No," Xiaohua said in all seriousness. Junior missed the opportunity to flatter the 2 seniors. "The 2 thunderboats are exactly one for each of us." "Do you really have this intention?" Su Ji raised his eyebrows and asked. Xiaohua was originally joking. However, after hearing Su Ji's words, he pondered for a moment and immediately understood the meaning behind his words. Without any hesitation, Xiaohua took out 2 blank jade eyes from his bosom and placed them on his forehead. After a moment, he respectfully handed the 2 jade eyes to the 2 and said, "I presume that the 2 seniors don't care about the construction method of the thunderboat. This is the construction method of the thunder pool, and also the result of Junior's comprehension of the thunder vanquishing bead. I hope the 2 seniors don't mind." Fairy Xingyu smiled slightly, took the jade eyes, and said, "At least you have a conscience. I've already given you so many things, and you only remembered to give me this little bit. The lightning pool has always been a secret of the immortal realm. You were able to obtain the thunder obliteration bead, so you obtained a method to create the lightning pool. Although I don't know if the lightning pool can be used in the immortal realm, it is still a prototype, a direction. Suji took the jade eye and nodded. Thank you. Then, Suji turned to look in the direction of the spaceship and said, Someone is looking for you. Xiao Hua nodded and looked in the direction Suji was looking. He saw Gongshu, Exin, and Gongshu, Ming flying towards him with excitement and a hint of nervousness. Gongshu, Exin flew in front while Gongshu, Ming hid behind her. Her face was still red. Xiao Hua smiled. He raised his hand and waved at the two women, indicating that they should fly over. Gongshu, Exin immediately sped up, leaving Gongshu, Ming far behind. Gongshu, Ming stomped her feet in the air and chased after them. Gongshu, Exin flew in front of Xiao Hua, tilted her head and looked at him. She hesitated for a moment, not knowing how to address him. Then she said, Senior Xiao, what did you cultivate? Xiao Hua was not unhappy to see this unsophisticated woman asking such a question. After all, only such a woman would have a pure heart. It was precisely this kind of cultivator that could be favored by the heavenly Tao. But he still said angrily, Palace Master Xingyue and Senior Su are here. Why don't you greet them first? Yes, I was wrong. Gongshu, Exin was straightforward. She hurriedly bowed to Fairy Xingyu and Su Ji and said, Greetings to the two seniors. I just feel that Senior Xiao is really unbelievable. When I saw him last time, he was only about the 5th level of essence energy. In just 200 years, how did he reach the Mahayana realm? I really don't understand. I remember that I blood sacrificially refined an imperial artifact to test my age. Seeing Gongshu, Exin speaking so casually, as though she was an old acquaintance of Su Ji and Fairy Xingyu, Xiao Hua coughed twice and said, Missy Exin. Yes, Senior. Although Gongshu, Exin was speaking to Fairy Xingyu, her ears were perked up. When she heard Xiao Hua calling her, she immediately said, What's the matter? Junior Gongshu, Ming greets the 3 seniors. At this moment, Gongshu, Ming had already flown over. She was completely different from Gongshu, Exin. She greeted Xiao Hua politely and placed Xiao Hua last. This meant respect and intimacy. And, although Gongshu, Ming was respectful, she still could not see Fairy Xingyu's eyes. Fairy Xingyu asked with interest, Exin, continue, sure. Gongshu, Exin was about to continue when Gongshu, Ming smiled and said, Sister Exin, didn't you want to ask about the apprenticeship? Why are you talking about other things? That's right. Gongshu, Exin immediately came to her senses and asked Xiao Hua, Senior, didn't you say you would find a master for me? Where is he? Xiao Hua smiled and said, Your master is a good friend of mine. His name is Wenchu. I don't know where he is now. Follow me. When you meet him, I will let you become his apprentice. Wenchu. Suji frowned slightly and said, What big words? Fairy Xingyu also felt strange and said, Xiao Hua, what is your good friend's cultivation level? How come I have never heard of his name? Junior's good friend is a hidden expert. Ordinary people don't know about him. Xiao Hua said and looked at Su Ji with a guilty conscience. After all, during the 5 brocade cloud painting battle at Black Wind Ridge, Xiao Hua had revealed 3 heavenly hearts. Xiao Hua did not know if Su Ji could see through it. Fortunately, Su Ji did not suspect him. He only looked indifferently at the Chitty River in the distance. However, at this glance, Xiao Hua discovered something strange. This was because Su Ji, who was as cold as a rock, actually had a rare sense of warmth when he saw Fairy Xingyu's appearance. What expert? How come I don't know? Fairy Xingyu obviously did not notice that warmth. She said angrily, Zhaixing Lu's Hall of Heroes has recorded all the high-level cultivators in the 3 continents. Even the Peng Lai Immortal Realm is no exception. Peng Lai Immortal Realm? Xiao Hua's heart skipped a beat. He smiled and said, Are the Dao Sect cultivators on the Xian ranking all cultivators from the Peng Lai Immortal Realm? Of course. Fairy Xingyu nodded and said, if it's not the Peng Lai immortal realm, how can there be Dao sect cultivators with 8th grade essence power? Even if it's the Western Paradise, the Lane Temple would never allow high-level Dao sect cultivators to exist. Senior, how can a cultivator escape from the Peng Lai immortal realm? Xiao Hua said with a smile. After all, that thing is in the hands of immortal Emperor Gaoqin. How would I know? You can ask your good friend, who is a Confucian cultivator, to ask the immortal emperor. Fairy Xingyu said coldly. He's called Wen Chu. I'm afraid he's on par with the immortal emperor, right? These words confused Gongshu Yisin and Gongshu Yiming. They didn't dare to interrupt and could only wait by the side. Oh, by the way, Miss Xian, what did you say about the imperial equipment that you refined? Fairy Xingyu suddenly remembered and asked Gongshu Yisin with interest. Gongshu Yisin answered without thinking, it's nothing. It's just that the imperial equipment measured that Senior Xiao is only 400 or 500 years old. Xiao Hua wanted to stop her, but he thought that if he continued to talk, he would definitely reveal himself. Therefore, he simply stopped talking and waited for the last denial. Hee, that's impossible. Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. If he was 500 years old then and 300 years old now, he's only 800 years old. Who in this world can cultivate to the Mahayana realm before the age of 1,000? Not only did Fairy Xingyu not believe it, but even Su Ji was stunned. He withdrew his gaze from the Chitty River and looked at Xiao Hua. Of course, Xiao Hua said with a smile. At that time, I said that the imperial equipment that Yisin refined was a little off. What? When Gongshu Yixian heard Xiao Hua say that her imperial equipment wasn't good, she immediately retorted unconvinced. Senior, Junior's imperial equipment isn't any different on Senior's body, but on other people's bodies, it works. That's Xiao Hua's problem. Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. Yisin, do you still have that imperial equipment? Gongshu Yisin nodded and said, of course. Ah, silly girl. Xiao Hua said earnestly, you should be careful. She is a senior, but she's only the palace master of Xingyue. What about me? I'm your future master's good friend. Can't you tell who's closer and who's further away? Don't be sold by others and count the copper coins for them. Yes. Gongshu Yisin lowered her head and answered. Her figure flew more than 10 feet away from Fairy Xingyu. Little girl, how about I exchange this for your imperial equipment? Fairy Xingyu raised her hand and took out a jade eye and handed it to Gongshu Yisin, saying, you can take a look at it before you decide. Okay. Gongshu Yisin took the jade eye. After looking at it, her face was filled with ecstasy, and she said anxiously, Senior, this shoe? Fairy Xingyu stopped Gongshu Yisin from saying more and only asked, are you willing to exchange this? Gongshu Yisin thought for a moment and handed the jade eye back to Fairy Xingyu, saying, it's better not to exchange. Io, what do you mean, not to exchange? You must exchange. Xiao Hua was anxious. With a flick of his sleeve, he took the jade eye and said, just give your imperial equipment to her. She's in the bidding business. If you don't take advantage of her, who do you want to take advantage of? Yes, senior. Gongshu Yisin rolled her eyes and immediately understood Xiao Hua's words. Without hesitation, she took out the imperial equipment and respectfully handed it to Fairy Xingyu, saying, thank you, senior. Chapter 4499. Of course, Fairy Xingyu did not care about Xiao Hua's narrow-mindedness. She took the imperial equipment and activated it slightly. Seeing layers of rainbows appear, Fairy Xingyu smiled and said, who said that Miss Xian is stupid? It is precisely this kind of pure-minded cultivator who can become an array master. I think this imperial equipment is really well refined. Xiao Hua, your good friend is lucky. Of course. Xiao Hua handed the jade eye to Gongshu Yixian and said, Yixian will definitely become an array master of her generation in the future. She will definitely be unprecedented. Ha. If she becomes unprecedented, what about her master? Fairy Xingyu pursed her lips and said with a smile, she will naturally be an unprecedented master. Xiao Hua was not afraid of Fairy Xingyu's sarcasm. This girl cultivates the 5 Qi thunder? Su Ji also spoke. He looked at Xiao Hua thoughtfully and said, "It's suitable for you to accept her as your disciple. I have enough disciples, so I won't snatch others' opportunities." Xiao Hua touched his nose and smiled bitterly. "You can't accept any more," Fairy Xingyu said with a smile. "There is no more space on the Xianhuang list. Here is a small thing for you." Su Ji casually took out a palm-sized arc from his bosom, in which there were some lightning threads that formed a knot. He said, "This is a natural object. It may not be comparable to the 5 brocade cloud painting, but if you can comprehend something from it, it will be more useful than any secret art or lightning array." Of course, Gongshui Ming did not dare to act on her own. She looked at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Why are you looking at me? Why wouldn't you want something that is delivered to your door?" "Thank you, Senior." Gongshui Ming was overjoyed. She took the arc-shaped object and stood beside Gongshu Exan happily, looking down at it. "Ah, it's good to be young." Fairy Xingyu looked at the imperial equipment in her hand that flew across the sky like a rainbow bridge. Each section of the light was like a growth ring, which seemed to record the vicissitudes of life. She could not help but sigh. Maybe you don't have to care about the past, as long as you live each day well. Su Ji did not look at Fairy Xingyu. Fairy Xingyu bit her lips slightly and replied, "A person will always be lonely. Only when the 2 butterflies fly will there be happiness." "Xiao Hua, look at that flying boat." Su Ji ignored Fairy Xingyu as if he was deaf. He pointed at a strange, flower-like flying boat in the distance and said, "That's the Dongfang family's bamboo flying boat." "Bamboo flowers?" Xiao Hua stared blankly for a moment, then asked curiously, "The flowers of bamboo? Don't tell me, bamboo can bloom?" Su Ji replied indifferently, "Bamboo will naturally bloom." However, there is a saying in ancient books. Every 60 years, the bamboo will change its roots, and the roots will give birth to flowers, and the flowers will bear fruit, and the fruit will wither, and the fruit will fall and come back to life. Moreover, the bamboo cultivator sifted through the wind and played with the moon. He lived a carefree and unrestrained life, elegant and untainted. He was a modest gentleman. People often use bamboo as their symbol. However, no one knew that although bamboo had a noble character, after being in a mortal world for a long time, it would also be polluted. This bamboo flower was the bamboo's self-cleansing will. Whenever a bamboo flower appeared, it meant that the bamboo could no longer endure the filth and wanted to cleanse itself and be reborn. The Dongfang family is one of the 4 great families of the hidden immortal continent. They use bamboo flowers as the symbol of their family. It's really thought-provoking. Xiao Hua looked at Ruojian, Ruosi, and the rice-like bamboo flowers and said with a wry smile, "Junior only feels that this flying boat is uglier than Senior's flying boat." Fairy Xingyue couldn't help but laugh and said, "Don't let Dongfang Qianghao hear this, or he will fight you to the death." "Senior." Gongshu Yiming was very obedient. At this time, he had already received the things that Su Ji gave him. He carefully pointed at another flying boat and said, "That orchid-like flying boat belongs to the Shimin family. And this Xiao understands." Xiao Huan nodded. "An empty valley, a solitary flower, elegant and pleasant, is a virtuous person in the world. The Shimin family wants to be a solitary flower, but this Xiao doesn't know much about the 4 great families. I don't know if they can do it. All solitary flowers are fake. If they want to be a solitary flower, why would they appear in front of the Xingyue Palace?" Fairy Xingyue smiled coldly, looking very disdainful of the 4 great families. Xiao Hua smiled slightly and pointed at the flying boat that was blooming with plum blossoms. He said with a smile, "This is a noble person with lofty ideals. He stresses on exploring the waves and cutting the snow and ice. I'm afraid he's from the Nangong family, right?" "Senior is wrong." Gongshu Yiming corrected him bluntly. "The Nangong family stresses elegance and independence. They don't follow the trend of the world and want to be a hermit. Their symbol is the chrysanthemum." Hearing this, Xiao Hua also snorted and said lightly, Senior Xingyue said that the Shimin family's solitary flower is empty, but I said that the Nangong family's independence is bullshit. If they want to be a hermit, they could just hide in the mountains. Why do they have a show-off here? Speaking of this, Xiao Hua suddenly asked, Senior, the ancients often say that plum blossoms, orchid, bamboo, and chrysanthemum are the four gentlemen of flowers. They stress on pride, seclusion, firmness, and indifference. Junior wants to ask, is this ancient person earlier than the four great families? Without waiting for Xiao Hua to finish speaking, Fairy Xingyue understood his meaning. She covered her mouth and laughed. Is there a need to ask? This ancient person, of course, is after the four great families. If there were no four great families, how could there be Confucian cultivators? If there were no Confucian cultivators, how could there be 100 schools of contending? In that case, Xiao Hua said with a smile, the title of plum blossoms, orchid, bamboo, and chrysanthemum is some people flattering the four great families. Yes, if it wasn't a big flattery, how could four ordinary flowers be regarded as the four gentlemen? Fairy Xingyue also greatly belittled the Confucian cultivators. Gongshu Yisin and Gongshu Yiming were dumbfounded. To be honest, they had never thought of this problem. A good illusion was actually said to be so unbearable by Xiao Hua. However, if they thought about it carefully, what Xiao Hua said was very reasonable. Why were the four gentlemen of flowers not lotus, not redbud, and not jade lotus? Why were they the most ordinary symbols of the four great families? Don't listen to their nonsense, Su Ji said in a faint tone. The predecessors can't be verified. Maybe the four great families picked the ones they liked from the four gentlemen. It's also possible. As the five of them spoke, the clouds above the four flying boats began to disperse. Many Confucian cultivators flew out of the flying boats, and these cultivators flew to different places. Some cultivators from the various families that had been resting in the mountain range also flew out and landed on the four flying boats. It seemed that they were going to visit the disciples of the four great families. It seems that there are many Confucian cultivator families close to the four great families. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes, looking at the Confucian cultivator disciples flying out, and said meaningfully. Fairy Xingyue said with a double meaning, whether there are many or few, I'm afraid there are more than the Sun family. Separated for a long time, united for a long time, divided for a long time. This seems to be a trend. Xiao Hua nodded. Now is the time of turbulence, and is also the time of heroes. If so, is it also the time for the Tao sect to rise? Fairy Xingyue looked at Xiao Hua and reminded him worriedly. How would I dare to think about something that even the two seniors don't dare to think about? Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Besides, the rise of the Tao sect is not something that can be accomplished by one person's strength, nor is it something that can be achieved by one or two generations of disciples. Overestimating oneself is like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. You also know that it's like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Su Ji said with a rare smile, the Tao sect in the world has declined early. Today, the hidden immortal Tao sect is opened. With me, Xiao Hua, in the world, how dare I let my disciples be bullied and humiliated? Ha! Xiao Hua laughed. This is just one of my ambitions. With my strength and the time I have left, I'm afraid it's impossible to achieve it. Su Ji didn't say much. Fairy Xingyue smiled and said, you underestimate yourself too much. With your current ability, although you can't revive the Tao sect, the prosperity of the Tao sect is second only to the ancient times. Moreover, Xingyue, Su Ji frowned slightly and scolded. Yes, yes. Fairy Xingyue rolled her eyes and said, and because of your Gatha, we noticed you. Xiao Huan naturally didn't believe Fairy Xingyue's words, but he didn't care that Fairy Xingyue didn't completely reveal her meaning. Fairy Xingyue must have said that he had the ability to revive the Tao sect, but Xiao Huan knew himself well. He might have the ability to fight against the immortal emperor and the Vairocana Buddha, but it was absolutely impossible for him to revive the Tao sect. The current fortune gate was not afraid of any of the families of Confucian cultivators, the Sun family of the Immortal Palace, the Buddhist sect, or even any great saint of the demon clan. However, the powerful Tao sect of the ancient times was destroyed by the joint forces of the Immortals, Buddhists, and demons. How could the fortune gate be a match for the joint forces of the Immortals, Buddhists, and demons? Seeing that the three seniors were talking about the revival of the Tao sect in front of them, Gongshu Yisin and Gongshu Yiming looked at each other and lowered their heads slightly, pretending not to hear. By the way, Suji suddenly asked, Xiaohua, it seems that you are very resistant to the four great families. Could it be that you and the Sun family of the Immortal Palace? Senior, have you forgotten? I have a good friend who is a Confucian cultivator. He is the immortal general of the Immortal Palace. Xiaohua reminded. Haha, I forgot. That Sun Wu is quite interesting. Suji nodded and then raised his eyebrows. He looked at the flying boat of the four great families and said, the disciples of the four great families are coming. I don't want to see them. You deal with them yourself. After saying that, Suji flew towards the Chitty River. Xiaohua looked at Gongshu Yisin and Gongshu Yiming and said, you two accompany the seniors and get to know the disciples of the four great families. Perhaps it will be beneficial for you in the future. Yes, senior. Gongshu Yisin and Gongshu Yiming agreed in a low voice. They watched Xiaohua leave with Suji. When they turned around, they saw four martial grandmasters flying towards them. Fairy Xingyue didn't care, but Gongshu Yiming didn't dare to. She hurriedly wanted to greet them, but when she saw that Gongshu Yisin didn't move, she hurriedly pulled on Gongshu Yisin's sleeve. Just as she was about to speak, Fairy Xingyue said, you don't have to greet them. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.